Lord of the Rings, my other playlist, and this time, Pastor Brian and I, who normally do Infernal Intercourse, are going to talk about the first episode of the first season of The Rings of Power. It took me a while to find someone who was willing to talk about it with me. I thought I would find lots of people want to talk about the Rings of Power, but apparently not. So Brian and I are going to talk about it. We're going to watch the first episode here and occasionally pause it and then give our reactions. And we'll just let it go and see how we do, and we hope you enjoy. Alright, so we watched like the first 12 minutes of the first episode, which starts off with some narration by Galadriel, which sort of carries over the Fellowship of the Ring. It was Galadriel who gave the whole prologue about how the rings were forged. And we see her playing with some other children who aren't very nice to the little boat that she makes and it's floating down the river. And I guess this is to start to show that she has this rebellious spirit. If you read the Silmarillion, you know that elves have a name they're given by their mother and a name given by their father. And the name that her mother gave her is Alatariel, which means a maiden crowned with a radiant garland, meaning her hair. But her father called her Nerwin, which basically means man-maiden, because she was more rough and tumble and was more like the guys. So when we see her willing to like beat somebody up, which apparently she wasn't really supposed to do, I think the filmmakers here are trying to show that she has that kind of spirit where she is ready to go tackle things and to be first and to choose violence on occasion to get what she wants done. So we're starting to see that they're trying to define her character, but then they completely slide over the fact that the elves didn't leave Valinor to fight Morgoth. Well, they did, but on the way out of Valinor, right, they kill a bunch of Tellarite elves, the kinslaying, and this is why anybody who participated in the kinslaying is never allowed to come back to Valinor. So at this point of history, she's under the ban of the Valar. She's not allowed to go back to Valinor. She is basically an exile. So we see her now hunting down Sauron, which she didn't really do in the Silmarillion because at that point she was married to Celeborn and living around with the King of Doriath, and doing a lot of like weaving and things. But very rarely see her in the Silmarillion, but she's usually doing like womanly things like making clothes and stuff. But here we see her taking a much more martial pose. She's in charge of this group of elves that seek out Sauron. She's clearly obsessed to the point that her fellows are not really sure that they like where this is going. They think she's too strident. She's, too much going into this stuff. And, maybe Sauron just hold up and disappeared and who cares? Let's go back to our normal lives, right? So we have them trying to build her up here in this first 12 minutes of this first episode, directed basically just about her. And her loss of an older brother to Morgoth didn't really happen in the Silmarillion, but I guess here's to give her that edge where she's going to be obsessed, not just because Sauron's still out there, but because he killed her older brother. So, any thoughts so far, Brian?
Well, so there were a few things that I had not caught before. I thought it was interesting that line that she talked about how you can't tell the light from the water or whatever, and I felt like, if anything, I don't have this knowledge of so much of the whole written universe, but just in this, what I know is going to happen in upcoming episodes, I thought that was interesting. But the one that really struck me was when her brother says, "I won't be around forever," and she says, "You won't?" And then she goes into, "We have no word for death," which was interesting. Mm-hmm. So I never noticed that before. That kind of got my attention. Otherwise, like you're saying with this, now it's kind of like plot moving, stuff. But that, I kind of didn't like the prologue at first. But at least that was interesting to me in there. Yeah.
So we get to see a little brief vision of Valinor there when her brother is going up over the hill, and then you see the city and the two trees. Which then we can also kind of skip over how the two trees get destroyed. But, we could be here for hours, right? If we're going to do everything that's in the Silmarillion. I just find it interesting the things they've left out here is the ban of the Valar. And that, because later, of course, we're going to see that they think she can go back to Valinor, and she doesn't want to, but no one says you can't. And at this point in history, at least in Tolkien, she can't. And it's only by rejecting the ring in Fellowship of the Ring that she earns the lifting of that ban, and she will be allowed to go back home. But until then, she, at least in the books, in the stories, she can't go. But in this, maybe it's more dramatic that she could go and then she chooses not to.
That's right. They give her the agency in here. It's her choice that she doesn't want to go back, not that she can't.
So we're going to stop talking now and watch a little bit more of this episode and come back and tell you what we think. Okay, so we've gotten a few more minutes into it. We've been introduced to the Harfoots. If you have read Lord of the Rings, you may remember that the hobbits were descended from 3 tribes of proto-hobbits, the Harfoots, the Stores, and the Falahides. And so we're looking at the Harfoots here. So this is before they found the Shire, before they've become the hobbits. They're just sort of wandering around as a hunter-gatherer kind of people, hiding from the humans, and kind of having their little, I guess we love food, we love laughter, we love all those kind of things that we like about the hobbits later. So
I mean, I think this is clever the way that so these migrate, so very different from the hobbits in the Shire, right, who don't go out from the Shire, but they have very strict boundaries still. So it's really playing with that idea of proto-hobbits, right? Like, and of course, the food, and I love how the one's big bottom gets stuck coming through. I mean, that's a very hobbit kind of a moment there.
And they're barefoot,
The hairy feet,
Yeah. So we're sort of introducing where hobbits kind of came from. We're getting they're still hobbity, but he said they do migrate. They don't stay in one place for very long. So this is before the time when the Hobbit ancestors found the Shire, decided to put down roots. So in this case, though, as you said, they have very strict rules. So they're not just sort of wandering around. They're wandering around under a set of laws almost that poor Nori, who we're introducing here as our main Harfoot character, keeps running up against and rebelling. So
I think that's very much Nori's personality.
And I think we can see that maybe we assume that Nori's going to be some great-grandmother of maybe Frodo or Bilbo, who have that sense of adventure, because clearly, even though they're hunter-gatherers, that going, and having adventures doesn't seem to be their thing. We do move every day, but we do it in a certain way. We have our traditions. We don't deviate from these things.
Extremely cautious. Don't make waves, because stick to what we know is secure, kind of, right? Which, of course, she's going to go completely against. Definitely.
Okay, so now we've gotten through some scenes where it's Elrond and Galadriel meeting. They seem very fond of each other.
Very.
But I just can't help thinking, that's your mother-in-law. And so
Mi suegra.
It seems a little weird, but we have not since introduced her as being married or having a child, at this point, which she did, but we're kind of skipping over her family right now, and I guess in order to let people think maybe there's going to be a thing between her and Elrond.
And she kind of has some moments coming up with a human too that are not, but I mean, I think it makes me uncomfortable because I feel like it's, I don't know, over emotionalizing, over even sexualizing, the energy, but maybe I'm just reading it. It reads to me like a patriarchal placing her as woman, even though they're trying to break her out of woman, I guess is how I feel. Now, I could be wrong, but that's how it reads to me.
Well, she doesn't seem to have as high a place here as she really ought to have. Because,
for sure.
Because she is from Valinor, right? And she is the daughter of, a very important elf of, and I can't even remember his name right now because I can't remember everything, even Brian thinks I can.
Encyclopedic memory here.
So, she's just basically not a queen, like a princess of the Noldor, and she here is being treated more like she's just your average Joe warrior type,
Right.
You come up through the ranks kind of person. And Gil-galad does he really have the kind of status to tell her no? You know, because she's really far above him in one sense.
High King or not, she's not just his errand girl, you know. Right? Like,
So they are kind of treating her here as if she's not that important, and she definitely is.
But she carries herself, though.
Yeah.
She doesn't play into that. Just everybody else seems to be playing into that.
Yeah. I did kind of feel, though, that maybe she should wear a ponytail. Because when we're having the fight with the snow troll, and her hair is like down past her waist, it's going everywhere, and I'm thinking, at some point, that's going to get in your way.
Especially when you're doing those little flips under the troll and stuff.
Yeah, you get stuck in the rocks or something. And here's where we introduce, not only with the actor who played her older brother in the opening scene, but here, whoever's been, I can never remember his name, who's been cast to play Elrond, they're very odd-looking men. I mean, I don't know what it is about them, but we always hear about elves being this tall, graceful, beautiful race, and I wouldn't call these men beautiful, I would just call them odd-looking.
Yeah.
And, they might be fantastic actors and maybe wonderful people.
I'm sure they're wonderful people.
But they don't seem like elves.
He looks like Doogie Howser had a baby with Skeletor.
He's definitely odd looking. I think we are going to get a little bit of his background later. We'll explain that he is, half elven, and that, at the end of the First Age, those who were half elven had to choose, right? Are you going to be elf or are you going to be a man? And that's when we're in Valinor, not Valinor, but in Numenor, and explaining how basically Elrond is related to the rulers of Numenor, because his twin brother chose to be human and he chose to be an elf, and so they took different paths.
I guess that explains kind of his concern for her, because he is in an unsteady situation more than her. I mean, she's fully entitled, and not in a bad way, right? Whereas he's kind of, half. Right.
Yeah, he's the little half-breed guy, and she is this high princess came from Valinor, who lived under the light of the two trees. And her hair is supposed to be so spectacular because they say that the light of the two trees was caught up in it. You can kind of see a reflection of the glorious light of the trees in her hair. So she's not just a nobody.
But gosh, where did we start there? Well, we've had a lot right there, so...
Well, first of all, I was kind of interested in the fact that this is the High King of the Noldor, right, Gil-galad. He's giving out these presents for the warriors who've come back, supposedly victorious over Sauron. And he's giving this big speech, which clearly Elrond has written for him.
Clearly.
And there's like 20 people there.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't need a big speech for 20 people, right? Well, he's the High King. Why aren't there like 50,000 or whatever, You'd think you'd have a big amphitheater type place for him to announce this great gift that's never been offered before. These valiant elves are going to be allowed to go to Valinor and live in bliss forever, and there's 24 people there to hear this, and it's High King of what?
Well, that's one of the weird things about this whole production. Like, the village feels like 12 people. The elves feel like 12 people, right? You definitely get a feeling like it's on a BBC set being filmed. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like a public television production sometimes. I mean, the production values are good, but it does feel quite tight, like a drawing room play, as opposed to the epic thing I guess we're used to, both in reading it and, of course, seeing the Peter Jackson movies.
So also we have Elrond being, she says it calls him a politician here. He's clearly a speechwriter. But his role here, he's willing to see her go off to Valinor, but he tells her that if he ever hears that no evil's returned, that he'll take care of it. Right? Yeah. So I don't know how he could promise that, basically.
Well, yeah. And, he clearly was, I feel like he was part of this kind of this was all designed to kind of pull the rug out from under her,
right,
and leave her with no choices and options. And so, I've seen this before, but I expected her kind of to bite his head off a little bit. And then I kind of thought, well, maybe she's playing political a little bit with him, like I'm not going to attack him head on. But she can't stay circumspect very long, right? She goes right for direct. I like that.
Right. So we see like the Galadriel in the movies. We see a much more serene, kind of wise woman who's been through the ringer, right? But here she's much younger, and so we're supposed to be seeing, I guess, her brashness, well, she is the man maiden that her father named her, that she's going to go out. We don't really see the other female elves here being warriors. And Tolkien did say in one of his letters that both male and female elves were trained in war. It was just that then the female elves, I guess because this is, middle 20th century white guy.
Exactly.
But then female elves, after being trained for war, would generally opt to have,
weave and knit
and have kids.
Spin.
Yeah. But, the thing about elves, which I don't really understand a little bit, I guess, about Tolkien is, okay, so they're eternal, right? And if you look at it, most of them have like one kid, or maybe two. Now, there's a few exceptions. Fëanor had 7 sons. Galadriel had 3 brothers, so she's from a family of 4. But most of these families are very, very small, and actually almost would have to be, because otherwise you're going to overpopulate the planet, because no one's ever dies.
You'll start mixing with your cousins pretty quick.
So, but even if a female elf is trained in the way of war as a child, like the male elf children, and then she decides she's going to get married and have a kid and raise the kid, you still have eternity, right? So it's like you have enough time to not just be domestic. You could have every job that was ever invented at some point. So it seems to me odd to think that every female elf just suddenly decides after being trained in war to not do it. But we never see in Tolkien that we have female elf warriors. We do get, Tauriel introduced in the Hobbit movies, so you get one, and now we have this one. So they seem kind of like one-off characters. Well, there's going to be a female warrior elf, but you'd think there'd be legions of them who had, millions of years ago raised their one child or whatever, because they've got all this time.
Do you hear many stories of male elves who choose the domestic realm?
None.
Exactly. So it's showing Tolkien right there. A little bit.
We get the bias of the
a
author.
little bit. Yes, we do.
Because clearly, if you have eternity, you could be a warrior. You could be a domestic, stay-at-home dad. You could be an accountant. You could be, you have time.
Teacher and a silversmith.
Exactly. You have forever. So, but the elves don't seem to do that, and they just don't seem to. Their family life seems very important to them, which is great, except that it can't occupy eternity. Once you've raised your 1 or 2 kids, that seems to be it. I mean, elves just don't go around having more kids. It's like, she has 1 in the books, Celebrian who marries Elrond, and Elrond's got 3, but his sons are twins, so his wife was only pregnant twice, and
well, they have been fighting a war for centuries, but
so they have their families are very small, and so they can't occupy yourself. Like you have a kid every 10,000 years or something. I don't know how long it takes to raise an elf child, though. How long are you a child?
What's the gestation period?
So but once you raise the kid, and then maybe you've had a second kid, then what do you do if you're been knitting and raising kids all this time?
Well, if you're her, you become a warrior and go to the ends of the earth.
And you think that there would be more women elves doing that because, why not, right? But okay.
And it does make sense, what she's talking about here about how this pain, this trauma within me, I'm carrying with me and I'm trying to work it out, right? So that does give more motivation for her than I remember noticing the last time.
And I do find it kind of presumptuous of Elrond to be lecturing her on what Valinor is like when he's never been there, and she was born there. She was born when the 2 trees were alive. She remembers a time before the sun and the moon were even created. you know, when the two trees, that was the only light. There was no sun, right? So you had one tree waxing while the other waned, and so the light was more golden. And then they reversed, and the light was more silver. So you had this sort of passage of time being measured by the trees and their light. But there's just stars in the sky. This is why elves eternally love twilight.
Yeah.
That they love this light, just when it's not dark and not bright, but you have this lovely glow of the late evening or whatever is their favorite time of day. And she's been there. She was raised there. We saw her there at Valinor, that opening scene. And here's Elrond telling her, "Well, I promise you, if you go back, everything's going to be great." And it'd be like, "How would you even know that?" Right. So he was. I can't remember where exactly he was born, but it was in Middle Earth. So. Well,
it is still weird to me too. This idea that she needs the High King to give her permission. I don't think so. Right? Like she hasn't gone back, like you said. In canon, she hasn't gone back because she can't.
Right.
Here, they're clearly ignoring all that, but still, I don't think she needs the High King to give her permission to go. She can go back whenever she wants.
Yeah.
In this,
where she obviously has is not under a ban, so she could have just 1,000 years ago said, "Okay, that's enough. I guess I'm going back home."
And she can also say, "No, I'm not really." I mean, that they are playing too much with who she is and this kind of colonial royalty kind of idea where we're all just subjects of a king or something.
So here we have him outmaneuvering her, right, politically.
Right.
So he wants rid of her, and how do I get rid of her? For the first time ever, we're going to gift these wonderful warriors the chance to go to Valinor and be lauded as heroes forever or whatever. And of course, she's royally pissed at that because she doesn't want to go. She wants to hunt Sauron some more. But she
also doesn't want to spend eternity with all this on her conscience.
Right. So it's here he has literally outmaneuvered her, and what can she say? She bends her head. She takes the little Roman-looking laurel crown on her head. And she's going to get in the boat and head off to Valinor, even though she really, really doesn't want to. Okay, so now we've had a scene where Arondir and the other elf have come into the village of humans, and we've seen that Bronwyn and Arondir apparently are making eyes at each other, and she's given him some seeds of some very rare flower that, for whatever reason, she hopes he enjoys. But we're not clear on really what's the relationship between the elves and the humans at this point, right? Mm-hmm. So they come into this village every 2 weeks to something.
Right.
For reasons.
Yeah. I mean, yes, they're keeping an eye on him, and I understand that's, not great. But, the reaction of everyone, the whole, record scratch when he walks into the bar, and then the guy, throwing a temper tantrum and all that, it's it seems out of proportion, at least with what we're given here.
So far.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we're getting here is, as will be discovered later, that where we are now is going to be Mordor in the future. So these are the descendants of the humans who fought alongside Morgoth in the Great War. And this guy's our ancestors made that mistake 1,000 years ago. How long will it be while you keep watching us, So these are the humans who weren't on the side of good.
We're Numenor or whatever,
So, clearly, their ancestors did something the elves are still, blaming them for. But the elves don't seem to be doing anything in particular about it. I mean, they just, wander through the village every 2 weeks and we're okay, there's still humans here. So, what exactly the elves are...
Well, we've talked before about, you and I have talked before about the difference in time, the elves and the humans. So 1,000 years to an elf, nothing. But to these humans, it's generation after generation.
Yeah, they certainly don't...
being supervised,
Right, and yet Arondir was probably around for the war. He probably remembers it, probably fought in it. So, because elves, as we said before, have very few children there, and then they're just around as adults for eternity. So once you've hit adulthood, you're just, around for a long time. So the elves here may actually remember all this stuff when the humans, the ancestors of these humans sided on the wrong side and fought with the Dark Lord and all his dragons and werewolves and Balrogs and the things he had on his side, and some humans. So
and maybe some of these humans killed a friend of his or something.
We don't know.
Clearly not Bronwyn's ancestors.
And she's the only one wearing. She's got a nice bright blue dress.
Yeah,
and everybody's
ruddy
else
cheeks, right? She's got this beautiful
drab brown clothes, but not her. Maybe
Yeah.
she's worn her best because she knows it was the 14th day and
That's
the
true.
Arendir was going to come back through town. And then we get, I guess her father who runs the bar or whatever, who's kind of looking at her like, you're talking with an elf again. And then Arondir's friend, like, I have to watch you because what are you doing? And so
I like how the old man calls your soldier. I like that.
yeah, well, he's got a nice bit of armor there. Of course, he's carrying around his bow and arrows, and obviously that we've had a lot more diverse cast so far.
Yes, it's wonderful.
We've had black Harfoots. We've got a black elf. We've had the two travelers that went through the hunters. One was black. So
this village had quite a bit of diversity as well.
So we are seeing more people of different colors. So, I mean, that's nice that we're getting more diversity on the screen. That's important.
Yeah.
And I know some people are really screaming about that, and it's like, give it up. We want to see more diversity on the screen. I mean, I saw that with the first Thor movie when Idris Elba, he was cast as Heimdall, and everyone's like, but they're Viking, they're Norse gods, how can one of them be black? It's like, well, why not? I mean, you're going to limit the gods to what they can look like? I mean, so, and who can complain about Idris Elba being, cast in anything?
That's right.
So
great role, by the way. That's a great part. I love that part.
So, all right. So we got some diversity among everybody, which is pretty cool.
And some of our favorite characters coming up, very diverse. It's very good. I'm excited.
All right. So now we've had another bit with the humans. Arondir's gone back to say goodbye to Bronwyn, or to say something else. He doesn't get around to saying it. And when they discover that a cow has been grazing on some poisoned grass, and he's now going to go check it out. But meanwhile, Bronwyn's son is getting himself into a bit of trouble.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So he apparently has, I don't know how, but
right, that's what I was wondering.
his family, somebody has been hiding the hilt of some sword that's clearly evil.
Yeah.
It has this sigil of Sauron on it. So we know that maybe it was even Sauron's own sword. And this kid has the hilt and is looking at it. But then his friend actually gets hurt by it, apparently. They don't show us any blood, but I presume he's pricked his finger, much like Cinderella with
That's right.
not Cinderella, but whoever with the Sleeping Beauty with the spindle, the needle on the spindle. So yeah, he has been marked by something evil. But meanwhile, the son, whose name I don't remember.
I forgot already.
And he's staring at it and getting this vision of the fiery, flaming sword. And so he's going to be... This is kind of almost our one ring kind of device for now, that it is an inanimate object which is able to affect you and maybe take over your will.
And that sigil flamed up kind of like the eye of Sauron there. And you can tell he's getting a little bit of Schmeagol, what I mean? Like he's getting
My precious.
my precious vibe for the sword there.
So yeah, this is one of those things I find is interesting when you read the Silmarillion. The Valar, who are the archangels, and then there's people like Sauron and Gandalf and the Balrogs. They're all the minor angels, right? And so they had at some point in the past, possibly even before they came to Middle Earth, when they were all in heaven still, have attached themselves to one of the archangels to learn from them, right? And so both Sauron and Saruman, who obviously isn't in this right now, but were students of Alway, who is the Valar who makes things. He's the smith, and he clearly is not a very good master because his students keep turning to evil. And it's like, you know, you should just quit while you're behind, Ale, because your students turn into like Sauron and Saruman, and they, you know, become these horrible entities.
No beloved Hephaestus here. You know,
so he's Ale is just like apparently not good at being the smith in charge of other smiths, but because Sauron was Ale's student, you know, this is how he's able to then like make rings,
right?
Because he is trained in smithing, and so it's just that he's going to use his smithing for evil, because he is evil. And we've had this discussion, the two of us have had discussion on Tolkien and evil, and how in these books, evil is like a corrosion. It's an emptying out of what you were originally. So it's a diminishing of who you are, drop by drop by drop. It's not who you were born to be. It's who you choose to be and continue to choose to be. So, but of course, the farther down the road you go, it's harder to get back, right? So maybe in the first, if you realize, oh, you know, that was a bad decision, you could come back to the light, sort of thing. But these characters just continue to choose the wrong path over and over again. And so throughout these thousands and thousands of years, they become lesser and lesser and lesser. Even if they're very powerful, Sauron obviously generally can lord it over any of the other Maiar. He has Balrogs to serve him and stuff. But even so, he is empty on the inside.
Well, a big part of Sauron's power comes from creatures' willingness to imitate that, right? You know, that introversion, instead of condensing inside, like you said, it empties, it becomes a void, it becomes a... Yeah. You look
into the abyss, and there's just nothing in there. So this whole emptying out in Tolkien, whether it's the mouth of Sauron or Sauron himself, or, you know, the race, the ring race, evil is just a diminishing. It's choosing to be bad, just letting that drip, 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 drip for thousands and thousands of years until you are something that you didn't start out being. So, you know, the ring wraiths are described by Gandalf as he says they wear the black robes to give shape to their nothingness, because there's nothing under there. There's nothing left of them except despair. And also, he points out at some point in Lord of the Rings that these rings, you don't die, but they don't give you more life. It just gets stretched out and out and out, thinner and thinner and thinner. And so until your very existence is torture. Mm-hmm. There's nothing left but despair, because you are nothing. You have worn away to nothingness, and there's just this horrible, horrible despair. That's all you have left.
Speaking of Gollum.
So he's not even as far as the ring race, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's this becoming nothing and having nothing but pain and despair is all you have left, and you don't have a name, you don't have a form, you don't have free will. You've literally just become this entity that's nothing but pain.
And it's interesting, that's a very early Christian Catholic, but early Christian, Augustine, the heart hole, right? They talk a lot about the heart hole, and you can't, no matter what you do, you can't stuff it. And Augustine says, my heart is restless, O Lord, until it rests in thee, right? And so even this idea almost of addiction even, right? Like, you're constantly trying to fill the heart hole that can't be filled with anything but, well, God in a Christian context. But it does kind of feel like Tolkien's taking that to him is the ultimate self-destruction, right? To kind of just keep widening that vacuum, that
can never
emptiness.
Be filled. Yeah.
To be consumed by nothingness. It's interesting.
All right, so we're going back to this show now, and it looks like we've got Galadriel on the ship headed back for Valinor. So we'll be back to talk about that.
Quite an interesting scene coming up here.
Alright, so we just finished the episode where a lot of things got squished in there.
Yeah.
So we see Bronwyn and Arondir finding a village that's burning, and then we find Galadriel on the ship going to the west and deciding, you know what, she doesn't want to go home after all. So she grabs her brother's knife and dives over the side of the boat, and apparently she just swim all the way back to Middle-earth. And then we've got the Gilgalad back where, and Elrond's well, first of all, Elrond's been assigned to work with Celebrimbor, and Celebrimbor's big project. But then Gilgalad notices that the trees are losing their leaves, the leaves are turning black and gross. And then we have a meteor coming over and it crashes right close to where the Harfoots are camped. And of course Nori is the first one to go over and see what's going on, and she discovers a naked man lying in the middle of this sort of flaming ball of what's come out of the sky. So lots of action in the last 10 minutes.
I once again was impressed with how much Galadriel acts without speaking. Her face is great. She's a wonderful actress. I kind of I enjoyed that scene of going into Valinor much more this time. I don't know why. It felt much more golden and compelling to me this time than it did the first time I saw it. It definitely felt very tempting. Yeah.
And we'll remember that the world does not become a globe until after the Second Age. So the world is still flat here. We can sail to Valinor because Valinor has not been removed from the earth. And so everything is a flat earth at this point. So maybe she can swim back. I don't know. It's supposed to be a pretty long way. And of course, Numenor is right in the middle. So,
and she knows that, right? Yes, she would know that, where that is, yeah.
But so we have this where she apparently is going to be allowed to go home, but she's going to refuse to go home. And when she jumps over the boat, comes back up, the boat she was on is gone. Apparently everybody else has now been subsumed in a really weird, creepy way, because they all start acting like puppets, right? They're just singing this song that's being sung, and they hear it in the air.
Yeah, the song was weird.
And then they just kind of look like blank zombies, and then they just kind of start disappearing and being absorbed to the light or something. And it's like, okay, this is Valinor is getting really, really weird and creepy.
Stay away from the light.
Yeah. Get away from the light. So yeah, it's of course Valinor at this point, because it's still in this realm. You can still physically reach it by boating over the flat earth. That is the thing about Numenor that is an issue, because they were given this island in the middle of the ocean. They cannot be given immortality because they're human, but they were given this island close enough to Valinor that they can see it, right? And so they always yearn for it. They want to. They're forbidden from sailing westward toward Valinor because humans can't go there, but they are given sort of the gift of just always seeing it on the horizon over there, this blessed realm that they're kept away from. It's supposed to be a good thing that they've been given this island to see.
But it naturally engenders resentment.
Yeah. Because the elves come over and trade with Numenor from Valinor, but they're not allowed to go, to reciprocate. They have to wait for anybody from Valinor to come over and talk to them. They don't get to go there. So, we have this whole thing where humans are always when they see the elves are resentful that they don't get to live forever. And that's one of the reasons why elves and people aren't really supposed to interact that much,
Who
right?
wants to live forever?
Yeah. Well, we assume, and I think Tolkien wants us to assume, that if you are created to live forever, somehow in your personality you can cope with it, because that was the way you are, that you're just, that is you, that's the shape of your being, and so you're cool with it. But people aren't like that. We burn bright, we burn out, we die, and we have a different fate. So it's believed by the elves, so they don't really know that humans have somewhere else that we go when we die that the elves can't get to. And so we don't know where that is. The elves don't even know where that is. Although apparently we do possibly live in the halls of Mandos for a while, because when elves die, their souls go to the Hall of Mandos, and they wander around there without being allowed to go into the rest of Valinor until the end of times, and then they can all be all reunited. So they're still in Valinor. They're still bound to this world, but people aren't. And so the idea is that when we die, our souls go somewhere beyond this world, and the elves don't know where that is. But apparently we may make a stop on the way, and because when Beren dies, his soul goes to the halls of Mandos, at least briefly, and then he and Luthien are reunited and kind of re-embodied and get to go back to Middle Earth to live a mortal lifetime together. But his spirit does make this sort of pit stop before leaving this realm forever. So humans still supposedly have a kind of immortality. It's just that nobody knows what it is. The God has not informed anyone of what happens to people after they die, except they just go somewhere.
And again, I come back to that Christian imagery that he's really playing with, right? Because elves keep their bodies, right? Humans don't, right? We become souls. But that's funny, because angels are souls without body, or spirits without body, or something. So.
Well, if you're killed as an elf, your soul will go to the Hall of
That's
Mando.
true.
So,
that's true, yeah.
Yeah. So we only know of one Glorfindel who was killed by a Balrog in the battle when Gondolin fell. And so then his spirit does go to the Halls of Mandos. But then later in the Fellowship of the Ring, he's the one that rescues Frodo. In the movie, they made it Arwen, but it's really Glorfindel in the book. And so he was like re-embodied and sent back to Middle Earth to help out Middle Earth and when evil should rise again kind of thing.
Like Gandalf the White. No.
Yeah. So he is literally the same Glorfindel. And as a side note, Tolkien seemed to go on the thing that every elf has an individual name that no other elf ever has. So if you see an elf named Glorfindel in Fellowship of the Ring and an elf named Glorfindel in the Silmarillion, they will be the same elf. And he felt really strongly about that. So when he would hear about people, say, naming their favorite cow after like one of the characters or something, or you want to name your kid after, he would write them back and say, please don't do that. If you really need to have a name in that language, I'll make up one for you. But that name basically belongs to that character and it doesn't get reused. So somehow the elves, who get a bunch of names, like I said, they get a name from their mother and they get a name from their father, and then sometimes they have names in different elf languages. So just because Galadriel's name is Galadriel in Sindarin, but it's Alatariel in Quenya, so she's got a bunch of names too. So it's like, but they all have to be singular. So how many names can you freaking make up? For everybody's going to have multiple names, they all have to be like no repeats, ever.
And they have a certain sound to them, right? Like it's not like you can just all of a sudden have, poo poo papa or something.
They mean something,
Yeah.
So you have these names which actually have some meaning. So like I said, the Alatariel is, maiden crown of the Radiant Garland. So there are no other female elves named Alatariel. She's the only one. But then she's also named Nerwin, and she's also named Galadriel. And so now there can be no other Galadriels and no other Nerwins. So you have to have a lot of names. Because everyone had to make up.
Nuritariel, Uberitariel,
I don't know.
And like Mikhail, Gabriel,
So names are kind of interesting among the elves that they can't do repeats. But in a way, I guess it's sort of the opposite of evil, right? Because when you're evil in Tolkien, as I said, you get this corrosion and you lose everything. You lose your form, you lose your free will, and you lose your name.
Your name, that's right.
So the Mouth of Sauron doesn't have a name anymore. The Ring Wraiths don't have names anymore. They are just nothing. And so that loss of your name is part of that whole loss of your being. And so I guess then the elves are like the opposite of that, where they always have these names that are theirs alone, right? That no one else will ever have this name. And, so, and it was just kind of, we got a little tangent there about names and elves, but so we've got a lot going on here at the end of the episode. Galadriel is not going to go back to Valinor where she was born. And
we know for a long time she's not, at least
right. This is the end of
we know a few millennia coming up here.
A few, and we know that because we're going to see people like Elendil the Isildur, we know the Forging of the Rings, we know this is right at the end of the Second Age. The Second Age is about to go kaplooey in a big old battle, and the whole Atlantis thing, right? Numenor sinking into the ocean. So, this is the build-up to the end of the Second Age. So it's been, several thousand years since the First Age, and there was a big battle, the defeat of Morgoth, for the end of the First Age, and that's then when Numenor is given to the humans who were true and fought for the good side. And now we haven't seen them quite yet, but we have seen these humans who are descended from the humans who chose poorly and were on Sauron's side. So But of course, for the characters who now, this is several thousand years before, and clearly they don't know who Sauron really is, and was, and what their ancestors really did. I mean, it's just back in the mists of time, right? If you're a person and something happened 3,000 years ago, it's like, what do you know about it? You weren't there, right? Because even your songs and your ballads and your traditions probably don't, go back nearly that far. So they do resent the elves hanging around and keeping an eye on them, but they're just doing their little human thing. We see a smith, we see people in the field, somebody has a cow, so they're just being farmers.
Healers.
And we got this herbalist and who helps people. So they're just like run-of-the-mill people, but it's just that their ancestors didn't choose wisely.
What's interesting, it's like a crossover. Go watch Infernal Intercourse too. But the way the angels condescend about the humans, you know what I mean? Like at the beginning especially, we talked a lot about that, how they seem to all be like, they don't like the humans until they hang out with the humans and they like the humans. That's kind of how the elves look at these humans in this certain place. But even the humans of Numenor, I feel like there's a little bit of condescension. Well, elves to me feel very condescending to each other all the time, everybody.
Everybody's condescending to everybody. Well, if you're in Numenor, clearly your ancestors were the best, right? Because you were given this island and this gorgeous...
It's a beautiful island. Oh my God, that architecture.
You're living in sight of Valinor, and that's supposed to be a big deal, a gift from everyone. And so you already know that you're the shiznizzle, right? You're it. And so, of course, then pride comes before the fall kind of thing. It's been several thousand years now. The Numenorians have been living there, watching Valinor on the horizon, thinking, why in the heck can't we go there? Why can't we be part of that? Why we're stuck here on this island? So we've now had episode 1. We've introduced most of the main characters. We've clearly Galadriel is driven, and she's going to go back, and she's going to look for Sauron. She's going to defeat evil because that's her goal in life now. So we've met Elrond, we've met Gil-galad, we've met the Harfoots, we've now possibly met some guy from the sky. We don't really know who he is. So we still have some characters. Elendil and his family haven't shown up yet, but we're getting to introduce some of the big players, and we've
Hillenborn, what's his name?
I don't know
if we just met.
What? Celebrimbor?
Celebrimbor, that's it. I can remember the name.
Oh yeah, Celebrimbor. So the forger of the rings, who was, I guess, Fëanor's grandson. Because Fëanor was like the original huge, cool smith, right? He made the Silmarils and stuff, and he made the Palantir, and he was just like this incomparable smith. And of course, he goes wrong too, because smiths always seem to go wrong.
That's right. That's right.
You don't want to be a smith. So, because it didn't mean Sauron or, Fëanor. But I don't know what to tell you. I don't know if Sauron or Tolkien had a thing about smiths or something. It's kind of weird. But anyway, we've got our major players on the scene, and we had episode 1. I hope you enjoyed letting us talk trash about all the characters here. We're enjoying it, and we hope that you will enjoy watching and listening to us. And we will see you soon for episode 2, at which point we'll probably be back on Zoom, because unfortunately we don't
be
get to hang
1,300 miles apart again.
We wanted to hang out together too often, but we're glad that this time we were able to do this together and have a great time starting off our little Word of the Rings. Let's talk about Rings of Power.
This is going to be full of topics for conversation. So comment, please comment.
Hit the like and subscribe.
Hit the dislike, whatever. But comment so
tell us we're wrong.
That's right. Or tell us what you noticed. Or
that's right.
Tell us, what an idiot I am. Whatever. Go for it.
We'd like to hear from you. I know that a lot of people had negative feelings about this show.
I love it.
So if you want to put your feelings down there in the comments, we'd like to hear from you. So until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Toodles.